I'm here with a couple awesome guests, Derek and Emilie Muth, who I'll bring on in just a little bit, as well as one of my fearless lawyers who just did some extraordinary work in helping them navigate what was a very, very difficult situation. We're so excited to have them join us. So they just recently were successful in finally coming back to Canada with their adopted daughter, Zoe. So we're going to get to that in just a second, but we'll see you right after the intro. All right, welcome back once again. As I said, this is a special edition. Usually I bring on these stuffy lawyers to join me, and technically I guess Alicia and I are here as stuffy lawyers, but I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming our guests, Derek, Emilie, and Zoe. She said, I've had enough of this stuff. These guys are no fun. I'm out of here. So we're so excited to have Derek and Emilie join us. And as I indicated, Alicia in my office is also joining. So welcome, everybody. How are you?
Hi, we're good. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. So, you know what, Alicia, why don't you lead off with how our firm got involved with Derek and Emilie, and just kind of a little bit of an overview, and then we'll dive in and we'll talk to Derek and Emilie about the situation that they went through, which I'll be honest, because this is my channel and I can say whatever I want, I think immigration really, really, well, they need to do a whole lot better than they did with Derek and Emilie, and we'll leave it at that. So, Alicia, do you want to lead us off?
Absolutely. Well, Mark, I blame you because you definitely were the one who instigated our involvement in this. But you said, okay, I've got this amazing family and they have a very difficult situation. It's an international adoption case. Alicia, can you help? And so I met with Derek and Emilie and tried to get more information about what was happening with their adoption process and why it was stalled out. And they are extremely organized. So they have done their homework and made sure that they have followed everything to the T. So they had prepared lists, they had timelines, they had all their documents in order. We went through everything together. It's a huge application, and they'd done everything that was required. So provincially, federally, and then overseas as well. So we went through everything and we determined that it didn't seem like there was anything missing, but they were still stuck. And Derek and Emilie can probably go through their side of the story, but from an immigration perspective, the second stage of the application had been filed. They were waiting for citizenship for Zoe, and that ought to be granted as long as the adoption was properly completed, and the adoption was properly completed. But the file was unfortunately sitting because COVID happened, and there were no officers in the Western Africa to review the file, even though Derek and Emilie had actually scanned that entire application. So they had an electronic copy of it. So initially we tried to assist to review a visitor visa application for Zoe so that at least she could come back in the interim with her family and come back to Canada because they'd been overseas for an extended period of time. That was refused. We also had done a TRP application, a temporary residence permit application, to try to get Zoe back, and that was refused as well. So after that, then as a last resort, we decided that maybe we had to go to the media, and Derek and Emilie carefully considered that because it's opening up their private lives to the public, and they decided that they had to do it because there was nothing else that could be done at that point. So I put together legal submissions, which were pretty comprehensive about how all the aspects of the case met the Hague Convention requirements as well as domestic requirements, and we submitted that to immigration, but there was still quite a bit of back and forth before they were able to come.
Yep. So Derek and Emilie, this is definitely kind of a high level legal side of the explanation as to your experience. But tell us about, how it all got started. Let's start from the beginning, because I think it's important for people to understand the context. And this wasn't something that, you guys had entered into a few months ago and were delayed a few months. This is a very, very long story. And so why don't you take some time just to explain how it got started, and let's go from there.
Okay, yeah. Do you want me to keep that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we started the process somewhere in probably 2017, I think it was, And for us, our number one concern was that we're doing something that is not just for us, and that is helpful and not hurtful, and that is ethical. And so what that meant up front was a lot of research, a lot of talking to different agencies, and really doing our due diligence up front on not only the legality, but on if we feel fully comfortable with the program. So that started, and we went through the full Alberta process, home studies, um, and followed all the typical guidelines of the match being independent, us not being involved. It goes through Alberta. All of that happened up front about a year before, and then we were presented with a match in the summer of 2019, and we got the green light to travel and to complete the adoption in country. And we had been in communication with Nigeria before then, and we had committed to adopting from Nigeria and a year before. And we did the adoption. In October 28th, 2019, we had a full adoption order, completing the adoption, and waited for some afterwards, and then filed for our Part 2 citizenship application on November 22nd or 28th, maybe a month after. And then that was it. And then we're waiting on Part 2. So Part 1, I guess this is an immigration podcast, so they'd be more familiar with the technical, but Part 1 was to prove our eligibility, and that was done a year before. And then this was for the child. Yeah.
So you reached the stage where you had done everything that you were supposed to do, right? Like there was nothing more that was waiting on you. This was now at the stage where you just had to wait for the government to do their part, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And so that was the end of 2019. And you're there with Zoe at that stage. And tell us what happened in the interim while you were waiting, because you went through some pretty brutal situations.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk about that. So we knew that from the beginning that we wanted to adopt a child with some medical needs because I'm a registered nurse. And so we knew going into it that Zoe had some health concerns. But we were, when we were in Nigeria, she was hospitalized right before we submitted our Part 2 application. And it was a pretty scary experience, especially being in a healthcare system that you just really aren't familiar with and navigating that. And so she made it through that, and we weren't sure how long we would be waiting for our Part 2. And so we had talked to a few people and some physicians in Nigeria, and they had suggested that, you know, maybe if you don't know how long you're going to be waiting, relocate to another country that also deals with sickle cell anemia, which is what Zoe has, where you can, you know, maybe access a little bit more comprehensive care. And so we decided to move to Barbados at that time because it's one of the only countries that takes Nigerian and Canadian visitors for 6 months visa free. And so we did that thinking, okay, it can't be more than 6 months. There's no way. And then the pandemic happened, and it was really scary at the beginning of the pandemic because well, I think for everyone, we just didn't know. It was like new uncharted territory, and we're here in this foreign place, which Barbados is lovely, but it's not our home. And so Barbados did a complete lockdown for 3 weeks, no grocery stores without notice. So we were rationing our food. Zoe had run out of her medication. We couldn't find it. They had pharmaceutical supply issues, and at that point we just like, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? There was like a last repatriation flight that was coming in. It was in May, and we had reached out to so many people, so many politicians, the High Commission of Canada in Barbados and in Accra, and just nobody could help us, it felt like. And so that's when we kind of reached out to Holthe Law Firm, and you guys were able to get us some movement.
Yeah. Now, I want to jump in, Emilie, for 1 second here, and I want to ask you a question. So, as you guys remember, I had the opportunity to appear before the standing committee, right? And I think you guys had that opportunity as well, didn't you? Did you get a chance? Did they get you on? They never
No,
did.
but we
Okay.
with us in West Africa did appear.
Yes. So when it came to the standing committee, this was something that came up for me, and the politicians wanted to talk about it, right? Because it's a great story. You know, the conservatives love it because maybe it's a way to embarrass the liberals. And then the NDP are the lover of all people. So surely one of those parties is going to find some reason to go out of their way to help you, right? So who did you go see first? Because I want to examine this in detail. And I want people to understand how frustrating this process is. I've got my own opinions, and that's fine. But the reality is, you exhausted all avenues through all of the channels that were available to you. You did everything by the book. You followed all of the rules that were set forth. And then you ran into these brutal roadblocks. And you guys kind of skipped through a bunch of things, and that's fine, right? People can go back, and I'll just flip over to this other screen right here for a second. You can actually go just Google, Muths, M-U-T-H, adoption, immigration, and there's beautiful little Zoe with Derek and Emilie here, and she's her patience is about as long as my kids. So we won't have her do a cameo today, but she definitely a beautiful little girl. And so you guys went through this process. And you did everything that you were supposed to do. And then you did what everybody else does. You say, okay, well, what's the next step? Well, maybe we can talk to our member of parliament, our MP, and maybe they can help us. And I don't know if you want to go there, but I bloody well want to go there. So you reached out to, and who did you reach out to? Just out of curiosity.
So actually, just to add to you saying that we skipped over a lot. Yeah, it's in hindsight, it's always easier to do your suffering a little cleaner. When I have never had a moment in my life where I wondered, where are we going to get food, and how are we going to eat, and what are we going to do? It was terrifying, and the in-hospital experience was also terrifying, and we both contracted malaria, and it was just an awful couple of weeks. So that was a really brief overview of what we went through.
And Zoe had a real serious medical issue that required your assistance, which further, I'm assuming, motivated you to leave, right? And to go to Barbados, right?
Yeah. They didn't have a blood bank in Nigeria, so I ended up being the donor, thankfully, because we didn't have friends and family to contact to try to get someone that's a match. And it was very down to the hour where we were on the phone with Alberta Hematology Clinic here at the Alberta Children's Hospital. And they were saying, you've got hours to do a transfusion. Like, Zoe is very bad. So it was, it was intense, to say the least. So that being your introduction in the first couple of weeks, very difficult. But Emilie being a strong nurse was really the reason why Zoe's here today.
And you being a blood match, Derek.
Yeah.
Well, yes, technically, but there's nothing. Yeah. So when it came to going into this, had looked at what other families' processes looked like. You know, we went to an immigration consultant first. Had a bad experience. It wasn't useful at all. They gave me the contact of the head of the ACRA Commission to contact her if I had problems, and little did we know that that's not a thing. You can't just email. You can't even get a hold of any Canadians at all to talk to, in fact. So it wasn't very helpful. We had the position that we wanted to give Canada the benefit of the doubt and give them the time necessary to do a robust review. And because we're pro the protection of kids from child trafficking, we don't think it was necessary for our case because of our paperwork. But we said this could be 4, 5, maybe 6 months, and we're prepared to eat that cost living overseas with our daughter. Canada's recommendation was that we adopt her, return her to the orphanage, come home, wait 6 months, a year, whatever, then go back and pick her up. But with a child with medical needs, like that's not even an option. So nonetheless,
Who told you that, Derek? Like, who gave
that
you
was
that
on the
wise advice?
yeah.
Was it just
I
an
don't
officer
remember.
or someone you had on the phone, or?
Yeah, it was yeah, this is when I was a little bit ignorant to all the different offices, but it was I went to the Harry Hayes building here in Calgary, the immigration office, and they gave me a 1-800 number. I had called them and punched through about 50 different just trying to get to someone. I think I was like, yeah, I'm immigrating a family member from the Philippines. And then I'm like, oh, good, I got someone. I got a question. And they took it to managers and whatever. And the question was around if we adopt and we finalize everything and we have a passport and we have permission from the sending government, can we travel? So that was, and they said yes. And then they said, but we recommend you leave the child and after she's in your legal care, which is, I don't know how that works in terms of international law, that you have a legal child and then you just say,
well, we're just going to leave you.
Yeah, we're just going to leave you. So, so we were prepared for a long journey, but not quite this long. And the pandemic kind of changed everything for us. So we had initially tried contacting ACRA, the office, doing the web form submissions, writing letters saying, this is our current situation, we need help. It wasn't moving. We contacted our riding MP here, who took 10 days of working it before they said, there's nothing we can do. And so we got a hold of...
And just to clarify, your riding MP was which party?
Conservative.
Thank you. Okay, so we start with the Conservative Party. And full disclosure, I am a proud card-carrying Conservative member, but I can tell you I was unbelievably embarrassed with this initial, I can't help you. Okay, so we'll leave that aside and then we'll work our way through. And this will lead into my evidence I gave, in the standing committee. But anyways, let's keep going forward.
And let me clarify, I'm a card-carrying Conservative as well, and I've never been disappointed. And because now I'm battling what I believe about immigration versus maybe some of the other economic policies and some other things. So this was an interesting experience, and yes, we were very disappointed. So it didn't really go anywhere there with the Conservative Party. So
did they explain why they couldn't, Derek? Did they explain why they couldn't help you? Like,
All
did they?
Yeah. All they said was that they had sent an email and hadn't heard back, and that
they tried sending an urgent email. The final decision when they said there's nothing they can do was when ACRA said that they're low staff. I think they had a response around that time. Is that right, or am I imagining
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have that detail.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But either way, with 10 days and like three phone calls and just one email response, we weren't satisfied. So we got a hold of a Liberal case manager from Ontario through a friend that had written an email. And she was advocating the best she could. She had contacts in the Liberal Party and was talking to, the head of the director of media for the immigration office, for Medici office, his director of case management, bringing up all these things, the situation we're in. She didn't mention who, but she said at one point a bureaucrat said, well, how long have they been away?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, at that point, I think it was like 8 months or something like that. And or maybe 6 months. And their answer was, well, it's not a problem for us until it's been 24 months.
Yeah. Okay. I want to reemphasize that. Okay. So it's not a problem for us unless you've exacted that pound of flesh, you've given those droplets of blood, which is an essential component of getting anyone out of Africa. So aside from the other continents, we'll leave them aside. But in Africa, unless you've been sitting languishing for 24 months, then don't come crying to us, because there's people that have suffered worse than you, right? And I know I don't mean this, these are my words, not yours, but that's the reality, right? There's this feeling that, we don't care about the condition of your child. We don't care about you. All we know is that the regular course is such that most people have to wait 24 months. So not our problem.
Yeah. What's the regular wait time? That's it. That's all. So until it becomes that timeline and is a trigger for them to, it's a messed up system when your prioritization is just on the administrative deadlines.
And we felt like they completely ignored the fact that we are Canadian citizens that are stranded abroad because of this. It's not just somebody who's trying to come to Canada for the first time. We're Canadians that are stuck, and it just seemed like it just didn't really make a difference.
And I did want to interject here too. Immigration has changed their processing, right? It used to be that you had to adopt somebody and go through a sponsorship process before you could apply to get them permanent residency, and then after that you could apply for citizenship for your child. But immigration recognized that that was causing a huge hardship to people, and sometimes people couldn't afford or forgot to apply for citizenship for their child, and there was some sort of inadmissibility, and that child would get deported back to a country that they had no connection with. So they changed the legislation and they made a process available to Canadian citizens to adopt and then go direct to a grant of citizenship. And so theoretically, that should be a better process.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, correct.
But apparently in your situation, it wasn't necessarily a better process. Okay, so continue on. So now you're working with the Liberal Party a little bit to try to find some pathway.
Yes, correct. So working with the Liberal Party, we started discussing a humanitarian compassionate minister's permit. But what came up so we wrote an email to the office, Minister Mendicino's office, bringing that up, which of course didn't go anywhere. But and then in the meantime, things were getting worse with the pandemic. Our situation was deteriorating rapidly, and the Barbados High Commission was saying that they can't help, they can't intervene because ACRA is saying they have specialized knowledge for West African adoption, and so that has to be the processing facility or processing office. So they couldn't help when food shortages. They were very kind. Like I was on a WhatsApp with someone in the consular office there, and he's trying to arrange for us to get some illegal food because you couldn't leave your house. I'm just being honest. You couldn't leave your house. Like, would you rather me starve to death? Like, you couldn't leave your house for visitors. You don't have food. And you're not allowed to, literally, you can't step outside unless you have a permit or you're going to the hospital. And so we were asking, how do we get food? And they're like, you can't, but we know of one person who's delivering chicken.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got by. So thanks, Canada. Like, it was a terrible situation.
How did, so just at I apologize for kind of cutting you off, because I'm asking the questions that everybody that's listening are asking. And you can see I posted a few comments of support that some of the listeners are posting. But how did that make you feel as Canadian citizens? Okay, you're not just a foreign national. You are Canadian citizens with a daughter through this process, right? This bypasses PR. This is straight to citizenship. You've completed the adoption formalities, and they're telling you, well, I know a guy that maybe can get you some chicken, and you're in a foreign country. You don't understand how things work. You don't understand hardly where to go to the grocery store in the best of circumstances to get food. What is even safe to eat and what isn't? It's like, well, this guy's passing by with some chicken, that'll maybe sustain you, right? So how did that make you feel? Like, Emilie, you tell me, how did that make you feel about your own country of Canada?
Honestly, totally abandoned. Like it just, and we like are smiling now, laughing about it, but
Yeah.
like we shed a lot of tears and anxiety and
Yeah.
felt very depressed and like what, like it's like just a huge, it felt like a huge disappointment in the country that I kind of idealized my whole life. I'm like, Canada is the best. And it just felt like, man, you're letting us down.
Yeah. It was awful. I can't imagine if I was an American. Are you kidding me? No, they'd
They
flown
would
in
have
and
sent in the
rocked.
chopper to like pick you up. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Canada's like, well, we have a process, so you can't really get
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But there's
Well,
one.
and the other thing too that we put in the legal submissions, I ended up having to do 4 sets of legal submissions for Derek and Emilie, which should not have been the case, but it was. One of the key things was that Canada is a party to the International Convention, the Hague Convention on Child Abduction and also on intercountry adoptions. And one of the requirements is that those adoptions are finalized quickly and efficiently, and that both states, the sending state and the receiving state, are doing everything that's required in order to bring that child back home. And there's also requirements for the protection and best interests of the child. And so absolutely the best interest of Zoe is not to be stranded in a third country without access to medication and food.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and as Canadian citizens, like us being told effectively that you need to rely on a kind country that will take care of you, and it's shocking. Yeah, because we were saying like Canada, like you need to talk to Barbados and help us out. Like we need help. Like we're completely stranded, and yeah, it's just bureaucratic. You can't.
So my question, Derek, is, do you think they said, well, that's not our problem. You're the one who decided to go there, right? You're the one who decided to take Zoe from her home country early, and so why is that our problem? Because you guys made that decision to go there yourself, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to argue uh, or to communicate that we're doing what's in Zoe's best interest. And if we had not done those steps, what is the result? So they like no one was willing to have a legitimate conversation on the what ifs. Okay, like what if we stayed in Nigeria? What were we facing medically? And what if, yeah, like what if Barbados didn't continue extending our visitor visas
Exactly.
during the, like what do we do? Like, do we go back to Nigeria? You can't get a flight. Like this is a crisis, like an international crisis, but no one seemed to have any forethought on the like what happens if we don't act and as a family and as a country. So it was incredibly frustrating, and you're sitting there alone with your own thoughts, and you don't have anybody to talk to. Until we contacted you guys, like we're just like Googling and being like, what do we do next? Like we thought that you could call your country when you're in a foreign country, call your consular services and get help. But no one's no one's gonna help you like in this situation, in this very specific situation. Um, and I don't want to say anything bad about Barbados High Commission because they were amazing.
No, yeah.
I'm being, yeah.
Well, you look at how you were treated by Barbados, and yes, they had timelines, and yes, they said, look, you guys are kind of well beyond the normal stated period for visitors, and it seemed like yes, they had deadlines and things, but they were more facilitative than your own country, and
Yeah.
I have no problems being critical because I'm pretty ticked off about this whole situation. I can only imagine what it would have been like to be in your shoes going through these experiences. And like I said, there's so many things we could spend 3 hours talking about, all of the things that you guys went through. But I saw what Alicia did. I had no idea when I said, and this isn't like we wouldn't help you guys, but I had no idea what it was going to entail providing a little bit of help. I thought, oh, look, this couple, let's do what we can on a pro bono basis to help them. This is a really, really important thing that we're doing. And I'm sure, Alicia, probably send a letter or something, like usually you can find someone who can do something about it because it just screams out for someone to help. But yet, when I was following all the steps, all of the submissions, all of the hours, like, I don't know, Alicia, if you were to ballpark, like how many hours did you spend drafting submission after submission? And,
Oh man.
like,
I mean, Derek and Emily are lovely. We spent
mhm.
a lot of time talking. We spent a lot of time discussing strategy. We spent a lot of time, they were interviewed, and so we had to do a debrief on the interview and what the officer might have been concerned about. We did an two access to information and privacy requests to try to trawl through hundreds of pages to figure out what immigration might be concerned about with the application. And then it was a ton of research in terms of international legal provisions, in terms of the legal obligation that Canada has to act on this application, whether we would file a federal court application or not, whether we would try to submit another TRP application. But ultimately, we really needed Zoe to be able to come home and get proper care and be able to be reunited with her extended family eventually when the restrictions are lifted.
Yeah.
So
And
I don't know. If I had to ballpark, I would say it was probably over 100 hours.
yeah, yeah. And that's 100 hours of banging your head against the wall when, and we'll continue down the story before I start making my own ultimate summations of how this all played out. But you've gone through the Conservatives, no help. You've gone through the Liberals, no help. You've accessed everything else. Okay, I know we've got another party involved here somewhere. So we don't want to leave anyone out, right? So and in the meantime, Alicia is going through trying to do every legal thing that we can think of, because obviously the research is required to make sure somehow there wasn't something screwed up, right? That everything was truly lock solid and there wasn't some step you missed or some step that you skipped over or bypassed, which we'll get to that. But I think there was an element of, or a belief by immigration that, that you had somehow, skipped a step. We'll leave it at that. But so now where you're at, you're eating chicken for supper, and this isn't KFC chicken, I'm assuming. And you're wondering where the next meal's going to come from. You're wondering if the chicken man's going to pass by again, right? And no help from your government, no help from your country. You're on your own. You've got, fortunately you had Alicia, because man, if I was helping you guys, I don't know if you would have had the same result. So I'm so grateful that I brought Alicia, and she's way smarter than I am. But you're at this stage. Okay, so now let's continue the story.
Yeah. So before actually Alicia got involved, we found out that the person that was helping us from the Liberal Party was actually let go, and it was part of it was in relation to trying to push to help a family that's not in their writing. So that was, we were mourning that because we didn't know, we don't want to cause people their jobs, and we're like, are we doing something wrong? Like, should we be pushing? So we questioned that for a couple of weeks, and then in talking to someone else who's a Liberal strategist, they recommended again to go back to the humanitarian compassionate permit from the minister's office. So we actually intended on just having your team review that and giving us advice on how do we get this permit? I don't know what this is. And that's when Alicia came in and was just everything we could have dreamed for, just in terms of compassion and care and professionalism and due diligence. And boy, did that bring a lot of peace, because we're doing our best, but we're not professionals at immigration. So to have a second set of eyes that was able to look into it was priceless for us. We should have started there. But
you never, who would have expected you to think that you needed to do this, right? Like, all of the systems are in place to help people like you. Like, there's organizations that they specialize in this thing, right? Immigration lawyers rarely get involved with this stuff because the system is designed to help you with this process, because it's something that, leaving aside international, the international relations that we have, this is a good thing you're doing.
We felt like we were being punished for it, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's like,
every time we talked to someone, it was like we were like buying a car or doing something that like that Canada's bending over backwards to help us, and we're
such a
wasting their
burden.
time.
Yeah.
Burden.
The
And it
precious
was,
country's resources.
yeah, it was shocking to us. Especially when we've got a country that's targeting to immigrate a huge, what is it, like 400,000 people a year or something. Um, and this is a little girl who's in a family that pays taxes and is going to grow up and be a part of Canadian society. And like, how does she not count in your little target there just because she's not an engineer yet?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yet she's going to be the Prime Minister of Canada.
I hope so.
Amazing.
So I missed a step. We were recommended through that Liberal caseworker who was told by the director of case management in Mendocino's office to apply for a TRV to get on a repatriation flight that was going to be in like 5 days. And so we scrambled and we got it in, and it was a pretty poorly done, but had all the right information. And that was refused by the Port of Spain the next day.
Wow. So it took them 1 day to refuse it. That's pretty fast process. That's pretty fast processing in the midst of a pandemic.
And the minister's office is the one that basically told us to apply for it. So we were so confused because we're like, we thought this information was like, and they even told us to pack our bags because we would be on that flight.
We bought tickets.
And the date we bought tickets, and the day before it got refused, we had to cancel, unpack. It was devastating.
Yeah, there's something else. There's something else going on in the background here because this just doesn't happen. We're going to leave the viewers in suspense. Okay, keep going.
So we were pleading with our MP to help because basically where we had got at that point was Alberta had done their full review, not absolutely full, but they had done all the pre-work review supporting this adoption and saying they've followed the domestic and international law, and they were willing to send a letter to say this family needs to be processed urgently. They're one of the families that International Adoption Services Ottawa was requesting for ACRA to process quickly, and so we had a letter from them from Alberta, and we put our heads together and said, okay, we'll get our MP to just do a cover letter and deliver it to the minister and say, hey, this is my family, my constituency. They've got all their paperwork and everything's in order. They need your help. And the MP refused. He said that he didn't want to get involved in this. Made a claim about us trying to do something scandalous.
Unethical.
You guys were jumping the queue, Derek. Like you had not waited your 24 months. You were jumping the queue, right? And he wasn't like he's going to get in trouble if he helps you because of course, hello, the Conservatives are not in power right now, dude. Like the reality is, how is this going to hurt you to reach out and help one of your constituents? And I'm royally peeved with our party about this. And we'll get back to why I'm even more upset as we continue on with the story. So I'm sorry, I get this, you guys went through it, and I feel like I'm the one that unfortunately is you guys are so patient. You've been so understanding, notwithstanding everything that's happened. Like Alicia, she's always rolling her eyes with me because I get so I just get carried away with this stuff. But this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't,
Well, as people who don't know the process either, it's like, okay, this person in power is telling us that we're doing something wrong. That we're
bad people.
Yeah, and then we're like doubting our due diligence that we put so much work and effort into making sure that this adoption is right.
Yeah.
And it just
we're just trying to do the right thing, and the right thing is to get home and get cared. Like we weren't being ridiculous in any way, and so it was shocking because how do you get your voice heard? Like, I've never, I just felt like our character, our background, our professional, Emily's a registered nurse, I'm a professional engineer. We felt like none of that mattered at all. Like, you are doing something sketchy, you're doing something scandalous.
Yep.
I don't want to put my neck on the line.
Guilty until proven innocent, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
So-
so the
so that-
MP was the MP was about this much help to you guys.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the second time,
And-
the second time, remember the second time
Second.
around, right? Because they did spend that first like 7 days, right, or something, trying to inquire, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So, and then things are limited with where you go because, we contacted friends of friends who have an MP that they know, and everybody doesn't quite want to overstep. That's their constituent, so I can't really help you out, but maybe I'll give them a call and check in with them. Thanks. So really, you've got all your eggs in the basket of your MP at that point because you're getting nowhere on the side, and your representative's not helping you, and now you can't reach out because that's crossing a boundary. So I think that's when we went. So we got ahead of ourselves, and Alicia was able to review, give us some peace, and say, there's one step that you could try. Let's just round it out, and then you've tried everything. And that was the temporary residency permit, and redoing our write-up to make it 100 times more professional and very well written and very succinct and keeping it properly. It was amazing. And so we read it and we're like, no way that anybody could refuse this. But it was refused. Yeah.
how long did it take, Alicia, for us I can't remember, to get that refusal back?
Yeah, so we submitted the two things together, the TRP and the temporary residence, or sorry, TRV, which is the temporary residence visa, and the temporary residence permit together. They came back very quickly with the TRV refusal. So we submitted it online August 14th, and then the refusal was August 25th. And then for the TRP, it was about another month or a few weeks, actually, September 9th was when they refused the TRP. And that's the same thing that Derek was talking about in terms of the humanitarian and compassionate minister's permit. It used to be called a minister's permit, now it's called the temporary resident permit. But there was not really a reason for the refusal, other than they did not accept that it would be granted in this case. And it's something that normally would be granted in exceptional circumstances, which this seemed to be. But
Yeah.
the problem with the TRP is that you don't come as a permanent resident or a citizen. You just come on an exceptional basis. You're inadmissible technically, but you're able to stay in Canada. And that's not ideal for Zoe. So once it was refused, we thought long and hard about whether to try to do a judicial review. We also were able to talk with another top lawyer in Canada who is instrumental in getting some legislation, well, judicially reviewed on another case, and said, you guys are on the right track, you're doing everything properly. And we wanted to focus, however, on trying to get that citizenship application approved. And so that's when eventually Derek and Emilie were also talking about doing a petition, and they ended up doing a petition with the help of another organization who was able to get that online for them and get a lot of public support.
Mm-hmm. Where did that end up at? Like 35,000 people or something? Like maybe it's still growing. People are probably still signing it.
38,000, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're probably still signing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really sad moment when we had to go and do that. I still remember our first meeting with Holthe Law and Mark. I remember you just saying, I think this is probably going to have to end up in the media. We're gonna not jump there, but and you said, unfortunately, public shaming is what moves policy, and we were really sad about that. Not that you said that, but just about the reality. Because we committed to upfront. We know another family who did a bit of a media buzz, and our perception of it was this isn't really helpful for encouraging people to adopt. Like this is a horror story, And so, we talk to people about adoption and we want to be pro-adoption, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, that could get way too expensive and there's too much unknown, and it sounds awful. All I hear is awful stories. So we didn't want to be a part of that negative cycle. And then the second part is we don't want Zoe to grow up one day and to look back at that and sorry, and feel she owes something.
Oh.
Yeah. No,
I mean, this is really hard as a parent.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was unfortunately instrumental in moving things along, and it somehow, in a crazy way, because you have a journalist that looks at it, it legitimizes everything.
Yeah.
Instead of having a lawyer look at it and that being legitimizing. So people receive media stories, and now suddenly that's now we see what you're going through, and we're like, yeah, we've been trying to tell you. But so we went to the media. We had a really, really talented journalist do our story. She looked at our stuff for probably 3 weeks and read everything. And we were particular about who we had do that, and we were very happy with the article that she published. And after that, am I missing anything in between this? Okay. And after that was posted, we had the Rural Refugee Network contact us and say, we want to support you guys. We're not getting anything out of this. We just want to help. We suggest we do a petition, and we said, okay, let's do it. So the combination of those at the time, we were told a little while down the road that created enough of a storm to not only get our status raised to high profile and so in the minister's office and immigration there, but it also motivated the sending of an employee to Ghana to look at our file. And at the time, I missed so in detail, at the time back in March or April, the last contact we had, really the only contact we had from Accra, was saying that they're short-staffed because of the pandemic, because they repatriated their staff back home.
Even though this is 5 months after they.
Yeah, still 5 minutes after they've had the application.
They've had full staff for 5 minutes.
And they're short-staffed, and they can't do. They said likely you'll need an interview, and we don't have the ability to do that. And so this will be suspended, and it's urgent need or emergency needs only. So effectively telling us to wait until the pandemic is over and staff could go back to West Africa. It was a pretty crushing blow for us back then, looking at the projections and being like, okay, is this going to be 2 years?
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
And the other thing too is we were with 2 others in West Africa that completed the exact same process as us, same agency, same everything. One child was even from the same place as Zoe was from.
Yeah.
And they both got approved in this time when they were repatriating people from the Accra office. We don't know what happened. They got the stamps of approval to come home, but our file just got back.
I'm going to jump in there. This is where, if I've got my Zoom call, I'm raising my hand here, right? Okay. So the question I have for you is, so surely those other couples, they waited 24 months, right? And they just happened to be on the 24 month when they got the approvals, right?
And we really love these people. Like, they're our close friends now. But one of them we helped them submit their paperwork because we submitted it a month before them. So they had been waiting a month less than us even. The other couple had been waiting a bit longer than us, but not.
And so they got their approvals, they got their visa.
Yeah.
And they came home.
Yeah.
Yep, they're home in
March.
I think.
All
And did
right.
they have a child with high medical needs?
No.
No.
I'm not sure if you had a chance to see this comment here that I posted, but this is from Katie there, right? And so anybody who's had children, you know, we can empathize. We can never fully understand what you guys went through, but I would be losing my mind. And this is where I come back to you guys. I know that's not how you're wired. It's how I'm wired though. So I can do this. I don't care really. I could freaking care less, you know, as whatever roles I have. At the end of the day, this was just horrible. And people need to be called out for it. And so often, you know, people just hide behind the bureaucracy, and whether they just don't care or whether the system is designed that you can't help. I don't know which fully it is. I'm sure it's built between both of those two, you know, those two reasons. But then we need to change the system, right?
Well, the interesting thing too, Mark, is that there is a system that was published publicly and from immigration saying for citizenship cases, they can be processed through the Canadian offices in certain circumstances. And I sent Derek and Emilie the exact section that said for international adoptions for Canadian citizens, they could be processed through Canadian offices rather than the overseas office. And they actually asked for that to happen, but there was no response to that.
See, this does not make sense. This is why there's something else working in the background that is blocking. Okay, and we'll still leave that aside, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so the Conservatives didn't help, the Liberals didn't help, the minister didn't help. You started a petition. Everybody and their new pet, their COVID pet, also signed that petition. And you guys are still stuck in Barbados. How long has it been at this stage that you've been stuck there?
Almost a year. So Barbados, a little bit less than that. So probably 9 months.
I think we were in Barbados 11 months total and gone for 13, something like that.
In the end, yeah. So at this point, it's a couple months before that.
Yeah. And that's important for us to emphasize. Like, you guys were outside of the country during the pandemic as Canadian citizens trapped abroad for over a year total. Now, obviously, that didn't encompass the whole period of pandemic, but the reality is this is off the charts unacceptable.
Yeah,
right.
and I didn't. I mean, we didn't stress anything financially in our article. It was like a one-off question that became the headline, which we shook our heads at. We're like, that's the news. So, but it was very expensive because we thought, you know, if we're away from our house for 3 months, it's not worth renting it out. It's not worth changing everything, packing it all up. And so we didn't rent our house out. So we were still, while we were abroad, paying a mortgage, utilities, everything, and also paying on an island that's not cheap. So, and all the medical expenses, and we're not working. So it was a strain that like is very serious, and we have been blessed enough that it didn't completely punch us into the ground. We're going to recover from this, and we'll make it. But most families, I think, doing this would have had to abandon their child or something to go home.
Yeah, they would be pushed into poverty, like they would.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't know what you would do. And we were getting to that place where we're like, what do we do? We're going into debt. We don't have work. What do we do? And
and you had an employer. You had an employer that was fairly supportive as well, right?
Yeah, they became quite supportive. Yeah, and they have been amazing. But there was a time where things were very unknown, and you know, financially, there was no certainty at all. And we weren't working, and we couldn't work, and the request to work remotely wasn't approved, and so it was really hard.
Tough. Yeah, back to our timeline as we're working through here. These little dalliances abroad are actually what brings life to the story. So, yeah,
Yeah.
this is great. I really appreciate you guys opening up and sharing your story, because sometimes the media have their own spin, their own angle they want to take on things. It's all about getting people to read, right? Getting their attention, and so they tend to just, they just have their own spin. So it's nice to just be able to come and just talk. Of course, I've got my own angle, which is I want to pound every stupid parliamentary process and political party out there and just tell them all to give their heads a shake. But I'll get to that after. So continue on the process.
We appreciate
so
that.
the interview is next.
Oh,
No, the submissions is next. Yeah, so we waited. We wanted to give. I don't know if it's because of our just personalities or work experience that we really, or we're just too Canadian, but we really want to give people the benefit of the doubt always. And we're like, okay, maybe they just need a couple more weeks. Maybe they need a couple more weeks. So we probably waited 3 or 4 weeks after the media article. And then we just said, we got to do something else. So, Alicia, I don't know if you want to jump in on your submission.
Yeah, so that's when we did, it was a 16-page submission letter. And there was a lot packed into there about how the Muths had met every single section and subsection of the legislation that immigration is supposed to look at under the Citizenship Act. So we submitted that, and it took a little bit of time before eventually there was a request to the Muths for an interview. But before that, that's when I'd sent Emilie and Derek the policy process in terms of the fact that immigration could have been doing this inland instead of overseas. And also I sent them how immigration can possibly do an interview remotely, because the last thing that I wanted for them was to have to travel all the way back to Nigeria with Zoe during the pandemic. So that kind of was the next step.
Yeah, so yeah, I think Alicia's being quite humble with the submission letter.
We call them, in our family, we call them the mic drop documents. Our case. So
because it was laid out very clearly that the implication is that Canada's saying that they're doing all of this to uphold international conventions, but in fact, by not acting expeditiously, not helping in the process, and by rejecting it and not taking the best interest of the child seriously, this is the spirit of the whole thing that they're not living up to. So it was very well done, and we're gonna have to like print it off and like frame it something. I think it was very effective, and obviously received, because 3 days after you sent, we got a call. Hi, this is blah 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 from Accra Immigration, and we want to schedule a phone interview. So it worked, and then the next morning, or maybe it was even that day, we did a phone interview. The phone interview was really, what's the best word? Disappointing.
so stressful.
Stressful. Intimidating. I have never been treated like I am so guilty in my life. Like I felt like they had someone like I was number one suspect, and the witness was claiming that that's definitely the guy that did it, and I got to justify why I'm not guilty. Like we were they brought up multiple times issues with the speed of the adoption. Well, it happened too quick, this and that. Questioning professionals, Nigerian professionals. And then the big one was they said, we broke the law. You broke the law, we're concerned. Yes, we're just really concerned with the the law, and they said that we had broken a law in place that said we needed to have 3 months of time in country before we adopted our daughter in court. And in the meeting, we were so like intimidated and kind of like questioning, because it's been 2 years since we like looked into that and the timeline. And we're like, did we get it wrong? Are we wrong about this? Like, I don't know. I don't remember if there's an exception or something. I'm sorry. And they drilled it home that
they accused us 5 times. We counted during the less than an hour interview, 5 times that we had broken that Nigerian law, and that's why they alluded to that being the reason why they were taking so long with our file, and why we needed to be
why they needed to look into it, why they need. And the thing that was confusing to us in the moment I was thinking it is like, but the other 2 families didn't. They had the exact same timelines, and so we kind of, the interview was over, and then first thing we debriefed with Alicia, and contacted our a coordinating agency, and they said, yeah, I'll send you a PDF document of a Nigerian lawyer who's gone through it. This law was changed 5 years ago, and people adopting through our agency have sent it like 3 or 4 times to the Accra office and have been accused of the same thing.
Multiple families.
And it was when they asked for the interview, and then when they gave you the interview was a matter of hours, because I looked on my phone and it was 7 a.m. here. It was even earlier in Barbados. And that's when they wanted to interview you. There was no notice. I wasn't able to take part in it, but I did talk to you afterwards. And when we realized that that's what they were concerned about, that the law had changed 5 years earlier and they were relying on old law, we had to scramble and get submissions in within 24 hours to get back to them before they could refuse the case on something that was completely legally incorrect.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in here because, okay, this person who is this inquisitor, and I was an immigration officer in a former life, so I can say whatever I want. This inquisitor who was on a witch hunt looking for evidence that you guys had broken this law, this 3-month law, and what is it called, that old law? What was the term?
Well, there was supposed to be a
gave you?
bonding period under the Nigerian legislation.
Yes. Okay. So this bonding period, they were taking the position, just so that in case that someone's tuning in a little bit late here, they were taking the position that the only way you guys could have gotten Zoe so quickly was that you must have done something to skip past steps. And it's an African country, right? So how do you get things done? You grease the wheels. You bribe, right? So surely you guys must have bribed someone to be able to get Zoe so quickly, and we're going to catch you in it. And you've already taken the time to embarrass our department publicly in the newspapers. You've been a thorn in the side of the Conservative Party. Well, they don't care about the Conservative Party, but anyways, you were for them. You were for the Liberals, and you were for the minister, and you went through all these channels, and you people are bad people, and we're going to catch you in it, right? 3 hours notice, or however many short hours it was before you had the opportunity to have this phone interview. No chance to prepare, to talk to your lawyers, who for sure we must have been helping you guys to answer the questions properly, right? No chance to do that. So this is perfect. You were going to get caught. And I know, because I worked on the border. I did the good cop, bad cop thing. I know what you've done, and now I'm just going to lead you down the path until I get you to confess, right? That's where we're at with this. I know this. And so this is what you guys were subjected to, feeling like criminals and feeling that after everything you've gone through, it was your fault, right?
Yeah.
All right, so continue. I just wanted to clarify that for the listeners.
Well, and I'd also like to clarify that the fact that they did a phone interview. So it's just like crazy, because they said in March, we can't bring you home because we can't do an interview. Okay. Then they fly a person all the way across the world to do an interview on the phone when they had an electronic copy of our file that they could have done from Canada. It just seems like a crazy waste of resources, in my opinion. But And then on top of that, they said, well, it has to be this way because of the specialized knowledge of this officer who didn't even know that the law had been changed years previous. So it's just like, it's kind of mind blowing to me, the whole, how it all happened.
And that's important to point out too. Like, this area of international adoption is very, very narrow. It is so narrow. And, you know, I have a very, very basic understanding of how it works, but the immigration officers assigned to adjudicate something like this, like this is so narrow. Like, they are the ones, they don't just give any officer the, you know, the authority to deal with these, because it's so specialized. They have specially trained officers. And so, yeah, so they're operating on outdated law, and they're accusing you of breaking that law. And it seems to me like that's at the source of everything we're going through. I can see in my mind, and I'm not saying this is the reality, but I can see in my mind MPs who are making inquiries, people are giving them responses that, oh, this couple, they've been flagged, right? Their system has been flagged because we're concerned about fraud, child abduction, all of these things. And I can see this coloring everything, all your interactions with the government. And no one's going to facilitate this couple who've bribed their way through to getting a child overseas, who've created their own situation. And you know, they're just not worthy of support. And we're going to catch them in the end. So it's just a matter of time, right?
Well, the interesting thing too is that on the ATIP that we requested, there was a whole section that was just blanked out. And usually
Really?
on an ATIP, the government has to explain why they are failing to divulge part of the information that they have about you on a file. But there was no reason why that section was blanked out. So I suspect that you're right, Mark. I think at some point the Muths were flagged, and it was based on an incorrect understanding of the law. And it was really difficult to try to pull together information, because technically the applicant has the onus of proof to try to prove what the foreign law is. And normally that's why you're working with adoption agencies, because they are there to help support and make sure that all those foreign laws are being completed, both in Canada and with the foreign adoption agencies. But in this case, it was up to us to try to prove what the law was, even though it had been changed and the officer was using outdated information from 5 years before.
And that's the thing too, like we know that our adoption agency is really, really good. And they had, our adoption agency, along with the foreign partner agency in Nigeria, had been asking the Accra office for months and months and months, meet with us. We want to tell you about our program. We want to show you the laws. We want to review how robust our program is. And we know from them that the Accra office had just blown them off, had not made appointments, had not
Canceled meetings,
yeah, for no reason. So it's just confusing to us.
And they had done something similar. Our foreign partner with the U.S. embassy, and sat down and opened the books and said, "This is
transparency,
full transparency. If you have any questions, and this is what every family is going to bring to the table." And in terms of for the U.S., I don't know what the process is, but for us, you know, our provincial territorial letters and everything like that, right? And they've been trying to do that, how to create a robust program, but the problem is Nigeria as a nation isn't a part of they're not a signatory to the Hague Convention. So this is the details of adoption, and the complexity. If you know anything about Nigerian politics, it's very diverse of a nation, and historically and even currently. And so to have like a complete federal program that's 100% Hague approved for every one of the states is very difficult. But the Lagos state, where we're adopting from, said we want to do everything Hague. Like, we want to follow the convention. We want to be as robust as possible. And so even though we're not a signatory, this is the best we can do. And we want to show Canada that we're doing this. And those meetings haven't happened, and that's not really been the excuse that it's a non-Hague country was thrown around a few times. Yeah.
All right. So we've got an interview, and then we've got a slightly panicked immigration lawyer. afraid they're going to make a crazy decision based on bad law, and then really, really cause problems with a refusal that, you know. Want to
Yeah.
talk about that,
So
Alicia?
right away, we got the submissions together. We provided the foreign law as it existed previously, and then as it was updated and is existing currently, more legal submissions with that. And then the officer had told Derek and Emilie that they would get a decision within the next week. And instead of getting a decision within the next week, which I assume would have been a refusal, as soon as they got that submission package, they instead asked for 6 things that the Muths had to prepare, and they gave them a month to do so. And then understand now that the Muths are running out of time on their ability to remain in Barbados. And so that was something that I'd also put in the submissions, was that it was important to get a decision back because their status was expiring. And that 30 days that the immigration officer gave them was putting them right up to the deadline of when they would have to leave Barbados. So Derek and Emilie would not stand for that. So they had 6 items in packages that they had to prove. Largely, it seemed like a fishing expedition looking for fraud. And I said to Derek and Emilie, this is pretty offensive. However, there's no point fighting it. You just have to provide every single detail and be completely honest and transparent about everything that happened because you have nothing to hide.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a little bit frustrating to have to spend all of our time and all of your time doing that when, especially since there was no new information except information about our agency, which was strange for us to be providing.
Because they had been trying to provide that information.
Yeah, like fee lists and things like that. But the key and the critical information that they needed to make a determination was already in the package. Our part 2 was 144 pages long. We just said we got nothing to hide. We're throwing it all in there, and we're gonna make it organized. And so we felt like there's like we don't know the point of this, even if there is a point. But we complied and we sent it back.
And we sent it back within a day.
Yeah, 24 hours later.
With
24
Lego
hours later.
giving input, like our Legos foreign partner, at like midnight their time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a response provided in record time. We've got time running out in Barbados. Literally, we are at the stage now. Their patience and their ability to extend was really starting to exceed the ability to do that because you're visitors, right? You're visitors in this country. You don't have any other status other than visitor status. And it's the only real country, like you talked about, where both you, Canadian citizens, and Zoe, as a citizen, Nigerian citizen, is able to actually be together as visitors. And have a level of, access to healthcare that's even remotely, in a position that's going to provide you with some comfort and security. Mm-hmm. So this gets responded. Then, like, it must have been the very next day you got the approval, right? Right? It just
boom. The very next day we didn't sleep, and consistently every morning, was it 4 a.m.?
3:30 a.m.
Both wake up, check your phone because Accra's open.
At 7:30 their time, 3:30 our time. We're like looking.
I'm not exaggerating. Every single morning we wake up at 3:34 in the morning and just look for it. And
how long, Alicia, if you have the timeline, how long from when we submitted that to I think it was November 16th, we got our approval?
So yeah, it was October 28th that they asked for all the 6 different application package informations, and we submitted that all on October 29th. We heard nothing from them. And then I don't know if you guys want to go into the next step or not.
What was the next step? I'm trying to think.
Oh, it was hospitalized again.
Yeah.
In Barbados. I'm like, how could I forget? But so she was hospitalized again. We weren't sure what was happening. Was it an infection similar to when we were in Nigeria, which was life-threatening, or is it like a mild form of, they thought maybe dengue fever? And so we again reached out to that saying, we want to let you know, we told you in the interview that her status was stable. It's no longer stable. She's hospitalized again. We need your help. they did not respond to that plea. We didn't hear anything.
So this was November 9th.
November 9th,
Yeah.
yeah.
So November 9th, Derek and Emily email me first thing in the morning and they say, we are in the hospital with Zoe overnight. We're not sure what's happening. She's got a fever. They've ruled out COVID, but we're really scared because this is similar to what happened before, and it's a medical emergency in a child with sickle cell anemia. So right away, we put in more submissions about it that day, and there was radio silence from immigration.
Yeah. So days went by, and thankfully, like her status wasn't as severe as it was when we were in Nigeria. We got really good care at the hospital in Barbados, and
4 days she had a fever.
And she was sick for about 4 or 5 days, and then she started to get better. And so then we did in all transparency, because we wanted to be as honest with them. And so we said, okay, she's better, but we're concerned that you completely ignored it because it could have not been okay.
And this was the fourth set of submissions saying, look, they're being completely honest. Zoe is now stabilized again. But the fact that the Canadian government would not respond when you have a 2-year-old child who's in hospital and their parents are pleading, it's just awful. I honestly was very, very disappointed in our Canadian government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
So we didn't hear anything. Just started coming around to say,
what are we gonna do? We get
this is our life. What are our options? Like, do we get deported? Do we refuse and go to jail? Like, what are our really?
Like, what are we
supposed to do? Can we take a boat? Honestly, like we're talking to people. We've got connections through my dad with some people that are connected in Calgary, and I got a boat. Maybe you can take a yacht and enter on land and get better treatment. What if we just take Zoe on an airplane? Like, what if we just get a private airplane and just show up? Like, are we going? Like, what do we do? That's where we were at that point, and being completely exhausted. Yeah, just like, we don't know what to do.
Mentally, emotionally, every shenanigans possible. You guys were just spent, right? And so then I know from our perspective, and for me, it came to my attention, and we might as well at this stage kind of pull in our Conservative Party again. So then, it came to my attention as I was appearing before the Standing Committee on Immigration that now once again, your story had now become of interest to the Conservative Party, right? Your MP wanted nothing to do with it, but lo and behold, apparently now it had become something of interest. So can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So once it was approved, once we got her full citizenship, then it was of interest. Am I missing something? They didn't talk.
No, you talked to Raquel Dancho's office before the approval.
Before we got our visa. Sorry, I'm messing up on the time.
No, it's all good. I think you had some discussions before, right? Because this was the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration was looking at the effects of COVID on immigration systems,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So they had contacted the other family that was with us, one of the other families, and they said that they wanted to pull us in, question us about our experience. And basically my response was that I'll have a conversation with you, but I'm afraid that we'll have some retaliation issues. So I don't want you to, I'd rather be anonymous. Yep. So that's how the conversation was. I'm like, we've heard too many things about this office and experienced too much that, we don't want to muddy the waters and be like, oh, we're trying to go around something and try to put pressure where it's not supposed to be. So we'll share our story. That's fine, but it needs to be anonymous now. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Because even, they knew that our firm was assisting and, the work that Alicia had been doing for you guys. And, and this is the problem that I have. And this is where I'll get up on my soapbox and I'll complain about the way our politics works in Canada. And it irritates me when parties use this kind of experience, this heartache, this anguish that you guys have gone through for political gain, and to publicly embarrass the other party. And I can tell you without reservation, if the Conservatives were in power, if the NDP are running this country, it doesn't matter who is, those other parties will use it in the same way. And I'm not completely throwing the Conservatives under the bus. You know, at the end of the day, whether it was the Liberals or whoever, each of the parties would have done the exact same thing to try to use your story to publicly shame that one in power, instead of just forgetting about the politics and just doing the right thing. Like, why did it take a newspaper article to people take, you know, for any of the parties to take interest? Why does it come to CBC or CTV or whoever? Why did they have to be the essential kind of key that unlocks new immigration policy in our country? Why? Like, why can we just not make decisions based on what's in the best interest of a child? And so, you know, and that's one massive disappointment that I have with our political system, is that it takes this, and that and miraculously these wheels that are impossible to turn start to turn when it becomes a political issue or a political opportunity. And it just extremely makes me extremely angry, I think is the best way to describe it. So 2 days before I appeared, miraculously, and I knew that I was going to be asked questions, and this is a matter of public record, so it's not like I'm concealing anything, but I knew that I would be asked questions specifically about your situation for the sole purpose of embarrassing the Liberals and embarrassing our immigration department. And if it was, like I said, if it was the Conservatives in power, I'm sure the Liberals would have been calling me. And so 2 days before I appeared, your visa came through. And that's a little bit better story, right? You know, and I don't think there was necessarily any timing, you know, with that. I don't know. I don't think I'm that important, right? That I would have had any influence in that decision. And, oh, Mark's going to come before the committee, and so we better push this through. Like, I'm not so naive to think that I had any role in that. But the timing was just really interesting, that your visa got approved 2 days before I appeared and then told your story. And so, yeah, it's just, at this stage, we're so happy.
Thank you so much for being willing to have that conversation. We've been so blessed to have you guys and to have an opportunity for a voice in some of the stuff that and we can get into this later, but a lot of people just will never have. You know, this isn't having someone represent you before the standing committee, having news stories. That's not going to be an option for a lot of people. So in the end, we don't really know what the trigger was, if it was political, or we're not really sure, but you speaking definitely helped, or being willing to, I'm sure.
Well, I think, in all honesty, Derek and Emilie, I think just the facts spoke for themselves. And I think they realized, holy crap. And I'm going to lean in here really close with a big look and say the facts appeared to be something different than they had suspected all along. And they realized that they were wrong. And what I would hope right now is that Derek and Emilie Muth and their little daughter Zoe get a formal apology from our government, confirming that, yeah, we made you know, an initial, I guess, internal allegation, if you want to call it that, but we had formulated an opinion that there was something untoward with this. And I understand, you know, that there is a ton of fraud in our immigration system. And I know that this colors it as well. But when we have two Canadian citizens, right, with a Canadian citizen daughter now who go through this level of treatment, it's just not acceptable. And, you know, and like, you don't want anyone to lose their job. Like, you never, ever want that, because I think this problem is systemic. It's not any one person. And even that officer, I have no doubt in my mind that they're a decent human being who was under marching orders to ferret this out and to expose this couple who was causing so many problems, when surely Surely they must have bribed someone to get this, to get the adoption through, greased some wheels to make it happen. And, and I remember working on the border. I remember having experiences with officers in the same port of entry who would have it really, the experience that person was going to have was based on which officer they got. Some were good cops. Some were kind of flippy floppy middle ground. Others were more facilitative, and the concepts of sometimes it takes a sneak to catch a sneak was one of the principles, that you have to, everybody's lying, right? Everybody's cheating, and it's just a matter of catching them in the act. And so, I have no reservation in saying that this is just, I don't care about that approach. Like, it's ridiculous in this context. If you were foreign nationals, you shouldn't even have to go through this. But the fact that you're Canadian citizens is just flat out unacceptable. And I hope that our government does something about it. This isn't just your average situation where a couple are just they have to wait 24 months because that's the way it is. Fine. If we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, fine. If we weren't in a situation where your daughter's health and even life was at stake, fine. Then maybe you ride it out, and that's the way adoptions work in Nigeria, and maybe that's the case. But there were life-threatening situations here, but for we didn't even talk about really in depth the blood transfusion. We didn't really highlight it. The precarious nature and that Zoe's life was at stake, but for the good fortune. Emilie was there to identify things, and good doctors here in Alberta to help, give advice. Like, she wouldn't even be here. So,
and that's the thing.
I'm done. Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of inquiry in an international adoption ought to be, what is the best interest of the child? And in this case, the government simply completely missed the mark in terms of upholding the best interest of the child, and that ought to have been the primary concern.
So let's talk about something happier. Tell us about your return.
Oh, it was amazing.
It's so awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Like, we're just so happy to we had to quarantine for 14 days, and we're just even so happy to just be in our own house and in our own bed. And it's just such a relief that it's like our space, and we know the roads, and we know how to get to the hospital if we need to, and we
it felt strange at
have
first.
people to call if there's an emergency. And awesome.
Yeah, the feeling of even just like the couch at the place, this is such a small detail, the couch at the place we were renting was so old and
lumpy.
Uncomfortable and lumpy. My neck would hurt when I sat on it. So for almost a year, I sat on the floor. I just cross-legged on the tile. I would watch TV. It's probably better for my body. I don't know. But just coming back and sitting in a couch and being like, wow, I'm so comfortable, and my bed and our things, and relying on consistent medication and having family support, and just, I think the biggest thing for us was like just this deep sense of peace that you don't have to deal with the uncertain nature of, will I have food? Will I be kicked out of this country? Will I be have no finances and no recovery? Will I have a job? There was just this weight on us that never went away. No matter what you do, it just never went away. And then, the way home, we definitely have a newfound thankfulness for the privileges that we do have, because those are privileges not every Canadian has, and so we're just really thankful. And on our way home, this was before the outdoor restrictions were lifted, but when we arrived home, we were driving home from the airport, and our people from our church and our community had lined our street, and they were all waving, and they had signs. Of course, they were socially distanced, but it was just, and then we saw them all through our front window waving at them, and they had filled our house with food and gifts, and it was just so, we're so blessed. It was so nice. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. That is so awesome. I just posted a comment here, Chantel Dubé here. She was caught with all the spouses that were separated because of the pandemic. And so she's She's headed up one of the organizations that has been advocating, and she appeared before the standing committee before I did, just advocating on behalf of all the spouses that were separated and some of the draconian policies, immigration has followed in refusing visas to spouses of Canadian citizens because they aren't, demonstrating that they're going to be able to go home with their temporary visa because they have a permanent one in the queue. So, she's made some good comments, and one she says here is that IRCC really should be studying this case in detail to reflect on what went wrong and to make amendments. And I think that's fair, right? Like I tend to be a little bit more aggressive at times when I become passionate about issues, and I'm definitely passionate about this one. But that's all you're really asking for, right? Is that no family will have to go through what you guys did. And yes, we would hope there'd never be a pandemic, which would complicate things. But guys, pandemic or no pandemic, you would still be in Nigeria wondering why your application wasn't moving forward. All of these other couples passing you in the system because, you hadn't met this 24-month. And they would have exacted a pound of flesh out of you because they felt like you were somehow, bribing and jumping the queue, which was, I think, our MP in Calgary probably, and the Liberals and, some of the MPs that you dealt with. I think that's what they just assumed was the truth because that's what immigration probably told them internally. And so this is under investigation for some nefarious purpose. And, I think they need to look at it. They really do.
Yeah, I know for us, like, apologies are nice because they legitimize some things, but we're confident that everything, like, we know what went wrong. But really, my attitude is just make it right. Just make it right. Like, you're all aware, so don't put your head in the sand. Everybody knows now. There's no like we've got the email train, we've got the submissions, like it's there. So just do something about it. Make it right. Like, no one should have to go through that, and stop hiding behind it's complicated because you have enough staff to figure it out, specialized people, and you're getting good advice from professional lawyers. So it's not that complicated. There's things that can be done, and that's what we want to see. I mean, the cat's out of the bag in terms of our privacy. So we would love for them to look into our case and see what went wrong.
Awesome. Alicia, any last comments before we thank this fine couple for giving us so much time during the dinner hour here in Alberta? Any last comments?
I just want to really send kudos out to Derek and Emilie because they have been extremely thorough. They have been so organized. They have done everything that's required efficiently and quickly, and they've been so kind throughout it. And I mean, I just admire them for their strength. I don't think I'm a parent. I don't know if I could have gone through what they've gone through and come out at the other side so gracefully. So I really appreciate you guys, and I think you're fabulous parents, and so is lucky to have you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Awesome. All right, guys, thanks so much. And we're excited to see where this brand new story goes and, this journey now as a family. So cool. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.